He is the ultimate American bad boy, a left-handed, cold-blooded killer who terrorized the Wild West and carved 21 notches into his revolver. But almost none of that is true. He drew with his right hand. He killed fewer than 10 men. His real name was Henry McCarty, a penniless, orphaned drifter from the slums of New York, who spent his youth bouncing around the frontier. By his late teens, Henry was working as a ranch hand in New Mexico. When a violent dispute over dry goods monopolies broke out, a localized conflict known as the Lincoln County War, he joined a vigilante posse and ended up on the losing side. So how does a teenage runaway, caught up in a small-scale dispute over general store profits, become the most famous outlaw in American history? The legend of Billy the Kid wasn't forged in the New Mexico desert. It was manufactured on a printing press by a sensationalist media landscape that had finally found its perfect story. In the late 19th century, sensationalist journalism was thriving. Audiences back east eagerly bought up dime novels and daily papers that promised thrilling tales of danger and lawlessness on the frontier. Meanwhile, local power brokers in New Mexico wanted to attract corporate investment. To do that, they needed to convince investors they were civilizing the territory, which meant they required a highly visible scapegoat to take the blame for the region's ongoing violence. In the winter of 1880, the editor of the Las Vegas Gazette, J.H. Kugler, realized Henry McCarty was the perfect target. He slapped the young outlaw with a highly marketable alias, Billy the Kid. Once he had a catchy name, the territorial press went into overdrive. Suddenly, almost every unsolved robbery or murder in New Mexico was attributed to this single young man. By the end of 1880, the press had successfully transformed a low-level regional criminal into a profitable character, one that could now be used to sell papers across the country. To cement that fearsome reputation, the press relied heavily on this single piece of metal. This is the only confirmed photograph of Billy the Kid, taken outside a New Mexico saloon in late 1879 or 1880. When this image began circulating in magazines and dime novels, readers immediately noticed the heavy revolver resting explicitly on his left hip. Hollywood and journalists ran with it, cementing his status as a sinister, left-handed killer. But they failed to account for 19th century photographic technology. The image is a tintype or ferrotype, meaning the camera captures the exposure directly onto a chemically coated sheet of iron without using a negative to flip it back. Because of this chemical process, every tintype produces a literal mirror image. When you flip the photograph to show reality, you can see the gun was actually holstered on his right hip. The editors publishing his story either didn't know how tintypes worked or simply didn't care. They took the image at face value, circulating a simple optical illusion to millions of readers. By repeating that detail in countless publications, the press permanently wrote the left-handed gunslinger into history, entirely based on a failure to understand the camera that took the picture. In April 1881, Billy made a daring escape from the Lincoln County Courthouse, killing 2 deputies in the process. 3 months later, he was shot dead in a darkened bedroom, making front-page news across the country. The man who pulled the trigger was Sheriff Pat Garrett. Instead of being universally praised, Garrett faced severe local outrage. Needing to salvage his reputation and hoping to profit from the national fascination, Garrett hired an itinerant journalist named Ash Upson to ghostwrite an authentic biography of his victim. Upson completely fabricated the first 15 chapters of the book. He single-handedly invented the famous statistic that Billy had killed 21 men, 1 for every year of his life. That book became the primary source for decades of future writers. The fabrication successfully rewrote history, turning a highly questionable police ambush into a heroic triumph over a bloodthirsty monster. With the outlaw dead and New Mexico safely packaged for corporate business, the press no longer needed Henry McCarty to play the role of the villainous scapegoat. By the mid-1920s, during the height of Prohibition, the media landscape shifted again. Writers and filmmakers catering to audiences frustrated by government overreach began reinventing him as an anti-authoritarian Robin Hood. Tracking the history of these portrayals reveals a brand that is continually emptied and refilled with whatever hopes or fears American culture currently holds. Henry McCarty lived a short, messy, and violent 21 years, but his cultural immortality was achieved entirely through manufactured editorial stories. A historical legacy is rarely built on reality. It is built on what is printed, shared, and believed. The true gunslingers in this story were the journalists who shot reality dead just so they could print the legend.